I should perhaps first mention that there are, rather like flood myths, there are hollow earth myths, underground people myths on every continent on this planet. So this isn't just me dragging a strange, abstruse concept out of the air and trying to make something of it. This really exists, this so-called myth. Yes, the concept of roundness I've written here, the very word paradise, which we have masses of. I mean, there are places called paradise near the Oval, the cricket ground, famous cricket ground in London, which is itself oval. Well, there's a Paradise Road.
Yeah, yes, yes.
Yeah? So these are all clues, and that might well once have been an ancient track to this thingy. Anyway, Walter Skeat, who's a famous etymologist, marvellous man. I've actually got his dictionary scribbled in, and the pages are torn, and I've had it for 40 years and I couldn't live without it. He describes paradise as a Garden of Eden or heaven, and I'm going to read what I've written down here because basically I can't remember, and he says it much better than I could. A very old word borrowed from the Persian, it is said. In the old Persian form, it means an enclosure, a place walled in, which is very descriptive of being inside a hollow earth, would you not say? The really important elements of which are the first bit, peri, around, P-A-I-R-I in Persian, which means around, and diz, D-I-Z, which means to mould or to form. And anybody who's got a passing acquaintance with the classics will know that the god of the underworld is called Dis. So that's another clue.
Okay.
It ties in very well with the notion that Earth's crust has accreted from centrifugal force. I wrote that myself. I hope you're proud of me.
Well done.
They're not only paradises, which in Hebrew has a very interesting correlation. Pardes, any Jews would be able to correct my pronunciation, but basically Pardes means orchard. So, and this notion of Agartha being a very fertile, peaceful place, as orchards are meant to be, or paradises all over the British Isles, and they would seem to me to be connected with these, not so much. Now the mazes. Now help. Let me get myself back on track here. The labyrinth. We said earlier, did we not, that the labyrinth was a coming out of. The maze, to my mind, which is a later invention, is symptomatic of humanity's desire to get back inside, because in a maze you start from the outside and you work your way in. In a labyrinth you work your way out from the centre. You remember the
yes.
Enoch to Idris concept, which did we explain about on video?
Not really, no. Go through it again quickly.
Right. Enoch. Now there's Caer Idris, not far from here, known in English as the Chair of Enoch. And I couldn't understand why. Is it called Idris in Welsh and Enoch in English? I mean, they're two utterly different words. It's not like Gwilym and William. You can see the connection there. Well, and then I discovered that Idris is also Arabic for Enoch. And that made me think even...
Really?
Yes. Even harder about it. So I started exploring, and it turns out that Enoch is from the same root. I won't go into the whole thing, but I think it's enough to say it's from the same root as our English word hunch. In other words, an inkling, same word, inkling, an inclination towards the truth, a bit like a bat finding something to echolocate off in the dark. You move around and you find your thing. Your hunch takes you towards something. Out of the labyrinth and finally to the outside. Well, why do I think that? Because from Enoch to Idris is the journey of the soul from childhood hunch to spiritual enlightenment. And what makes me sure that I'm on the right track here, out of the labyrinth, is that this name Idris, the Welsh for labyrinth is Idrisfa. So there is your Idris, you see.
I didn't know that. Yes, that does make a direct connection.
Well, it does rather. So how on earth did we get from there? Where were we before? Mazes, yes. Mazes, a maze to me is, I haven't got to the bottom of the word, but a maze would seem to me, because you start on the outside and you move to the centre with lots of alleys and blind spots and false starts and things on the way, that would seem to me to be symptomatic of humanity's desire to get back to our paradise, our inner earth.
Right.
Am I making sense? Does it sound
yes.
too abstruse to be possible? So we start with the labyrinth and then we move back to the maze. But what really I haven't finished yet with Agartha, because Agartha is spelt in...
So where's the word Agartha come from? What is
very,
it?
very good question.
Right, yes.
Anybody who knows a little bit about Mesopotamian history will know that there was an equivalent civilization to Sumeria, and it was called Akkad.
I've heard of Akkad, yes.
It's also spelt Agade, Agade.
Okay.
My theory is that Agartha, let me put that the other way around. My theory is that Akkad was an attempt to reproduce Agartha on the surface, because the words are the same.
Right, right. So civilization inside the earth produced back on the outside.
Yes, they were trying to reproduce the same idea of harmony, pure love, disinterested love, when you do your best for your fellow man, and with any luck he does the same for you, sort of thing. And what concentrated my mind on that particular idea was this notion of, there's a classical Greek notion of agape, which is Agape, and it simply means the sort of disinterested love that I've just been talking about. So there's that. Then I thought, well, what about this word academy? Let's look at academy. Well, if you look up academy, it's supposed to come from a Greek person called Academos, who is supposed to have played an enormous part in the Trojan Wars. But guess what? Academos doesn't appear anywhere in either the Iliad or Darius the Phrygian or Dictys Cretensis. So he looks to me like a back formation, which means somebody's taken an idea. It's a bit like saying emotive. Emotive is a back formation from the word emotion, and it has come to mean either provocative or moving, when really what people mean is provocative or moving, if you see what I mean. So they've taken a word and they've created a prequel out of it, like the Star Wars prequels.
Yes.
So academy, Akkad, there was Plato sitting under a tree, discussing, arguing, to use the word in its proper Greek sense, which is to simply discuss and lick a concept into shape by having a great many different people's input and knowledge and all the rest of it. And you toss this around in a gentlemanly sort of fashion, and by the end of your discussion you hope you've got a more rounded and a deeper understanding of whatever it was that you were talking about. This is the source of Plato's Academy, and I think that's the same root, because there's a disinterested, a circular sort of feeling to the whole thing.
So you think the root is similar to the Akkad?
It's the same word, because it's not actually a Greek word. That's why they had to make up Academos.
Oh, right. Okay.
Sorry, I should have said that before.
So what you're saying is it comes from Akkad.
I think it's the same. I think it's the same root. Yes.
Right.
Because the concept is the same. The motive is the same. Disinterested discussion. No batting people over the head as they went on and did in Assyria all the time. So tiresome and painful. So there's that. I haven't mentioned Admiral Richard Byrd yet, have I? Admiral Richard Byrd took he commanded, I think it was an American frigate.
It was a whole fleet, I think, wasn't it? Yeah.
Was it a fleet?
He's an admiral, yes.
Oh yes, he was. Yes, you're quite right. But I thought he was a commander. No, admiral. Beg your pardon. So he was in command of the entire thing, and we're talking about Operation High Jump in 1948. Whatever it was he saw down there in Antarctica, I'll explain. We need my cousin for this, but I will explain a very little. Operation High Jump was a very little known sea battle that took place between the Allies, in other words America and Britain, and Germany in the Antarctic oceans, don't know which bit of them, in 1948.
Which is after the war was ended.
It's long after even the war in the Far East was supposed to have ended. So yes. So what on earth was going on? Well, the Germans won, and the YouTube community has a lot of theories about what Germany is doing in Antarctica, and possibly what they're even doing in Agartha, but I haven't studied that aspect of it, so I can't really say. People will have to look for themselves and find it out. The point about Admiral Richard Byrd is that in the 50s, I think it was, he did a flight over the North Pole and came back with a most astonishing story to tell. And basically his aeroplane, he had a navigator with him, his aeroplane was taken control of by some unseen force, none of his controls worked, and he was not taken over the entrance, he was taken inside it. It's supposed to be 90 miles wide, it's much narrower on the South Pole, but the North Pole entrance is supposed to be 90 miles wide, and I'm really sorry, but I can't remember where I got that from. Possibly Admiral Byrd himself.
Yes, I've seen you got the book of the account.
Yes,
as well,
this is even more interesting. This isn't about Admiral Byrd, but this is a fascinating book. Really very interesting indeed, and soberly written, and it takes in all the stories from many different parts of the world, which we won't go into here because we haven't really got time. But there's a Hindu, if I can find now. See, I've gone and completely messed up my notes. Shuffled my notes. I had something so amazing to tell you. The Hindu name. I've just remembered. The Hindu name for Agartha is Aryavarta. That's possibly a later name than Agartha. Maybe Agartha is the original name, I don't know. Anyway, Admiral Byrd, yes, and on the principle that one would rather trust somebody sensible like a United States admiral or a British fighter pilot, or somebody who's flies Boeings for a living. I would rather trust their word. If they say they've seen a UFO, I'm more likely to pay attention to them than I am to some politician with an agenda who says these things don't exist. I don't know about you, but it seems to me that Admiral Byrd's word is to be trusted, particularly since he wrote down what he saw when he got back. He went to be debriefed, and his aeroplane was landed again under this unknown power that wasn't his own, and he met somebody inside Inner Earth, and he was asked to take careful note of everything he saw, because one day his information would be very valuable. When he got back and he was debriefed, he was told by his commanding officers, on no account are you to say a word about this. And being an officer and a gentleman, he didn't. But when he was approaching death, he wrote the whole thing down. He said, I've kept my word, all my career and all my life I've kept my word, but I'm not long for this world, and I'm now going to do what I was asked to do, which is to write the whole thing down. So he wrote it down, and it is out there. It's in many different. You can just Google Admiral Richard Byrd and find it.
Sorry, but I remember I did look into this some years ago. Was that he did do quite a few TV interviews about his South Pole trip, didn't he?
Yes, he did. Yes, but I was looking on YouTube, and there are some actual. It's not Pathé. That's British. Or is it Pathé? I don't know. Anyway, there is some original footage of the South Pole expedition
Yeah, there's
business.
lots about that, wasn't
Yes,
there? And he
but
got
nothing
some
about the
very
North Pole that I
high
can find.
Very high profile interviews when he came back.
Yes, but that was something different.
But I haven't even mentioned the North Pole. No, that was his flying expedition.
Yes, yeah, and again the books are out there. So and there was a not quite sure how much more do you want to do, because
Yeah,
there's-
I can always. Let's stop a second.
okay, this is. It looks a bit comic strip-ish. Can we see that?
Just down a bit if you can. There we go. Yeah, okay. There's the Secret Lost Diary of Admiral Richard E. Byrd and the Phantom of the Poles.
Yes.
A secret expedition and a journey to a paradise inside the Earth. He uses the word paradise.
Yes.
Interesting. Yeah, the style of the cover is very much 1950s sort of sci-fi style.
It is, and
Yeah.
it's a pity because it's actually got some very, very useful
it doesn't give a
information
very serious
inside.
look, does it? Does that?
It's and unfortunately it's written in a funny sort of cartoony way. Can we see that?
Yeah, it's like silent movie captions.
Oh,
aren't
just a
they?
bit, yes. But it's got a map of Agartha there.
It's interesting. I didn't notice the word paradise when I looked on the cover before. Yeah, okay.
And there
And
he
the Garth
is.
there as well, yeah.
That's him during Operation High Jump, so that people know that I haven't taken leave of my senses and I'm not just pushing a Tintin story or something.
I'm not sure if it's convincing proof, but yeah, it's evidence.
It's not proof, no, but
No, if you're not losing your senses.
it's the best I can. Oh, I see what you mean. Oh, well, less said about that, the better, perhaps. Yes, it gets a little bit more serious later on. It's a fairly serious discussion of it with temperatures, wind speeds, and all the rest of it.
Yeah,
it's well worth looking at that.
Yeah, because he was a very accomplished explorer as well, wasn't he? As well as military commander.
Yes, and a highly honourable man. They asked him not to say anything, and and he'd taken the American equivalent of the King's Commission, and he didn't say a thing until he knew he was dying, and then he wrote it all down. Now, I mean, I can't vouch for whether this might have been adulterated in some way. I don't know. I mean, I'm examining all this like anybody else, but
yes.
It's a good start. What really did it for me was a tiny little entry in Sparrow's dictionary. And I know you like Welsh dictionaries just as much as I do.
I do. Sparrow's Welsh Dictionary, yes.
Okay, well, if I
Was that 19? Oh, God,
if I can tell you, if I tell you that I nearly fell out of my seat when I discovered this.
Go on, you.
The Welsh word for opening, orifice, or vent. You ready for this?
Go on, I dread.
Agorfa.
No way.
Yeah.
Well, agor is to open, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes, that's right.
But it's to me that was the icing on the etymological cake, the linguistical cake. It really was.
Yes. It's quite remarkable how these things seem to tie in, isn't it?
Well, particularly the run up of names. The name Agatha is connected as well, which makes perfect sense. But
So which name?
Agatha.
Oh, Agatha.
Yes.
Agatha Christie.
Yes.
I know Agatha.
That's
okay.
the Christian name Agatha is
Right, yes.
connected. Arya Vartha, the Hindu version, would seem to me to have a connection with Aryan. You know, Aryan.
Yeah, okay.
And
Well, of course, Sanskrit and Welsh are very closely linked languages anyway.
very close.
Yes.
Yes. So that's really what I've discovered
Wow.
so far.
It's pretty big stuff, isn't it?
It is, and it seems to tie. It seems to tie a religious concept, the round, the rings, the concentric rings, in very nicely with this physics idea of is it an accreted surface of Earth, a crust?
You could describe it that way.
A
Yeah.
crust with a thing inside.
Yeah.
And
yes.
it just seems to fit, like a lot of these things.
Interesting, yeah. Yes, we've got this situation where what interests me as well is the providing the physical evidence, or as much as available anyway, that it could be this life inside the planet is, to me, is almost secondary. It's the belief that there was this inside the Earth is as important if you're looking at ancient people. To my mind, what would you think about that?
I would say you're not taking it far enough. I would say the belief comes from somewhere, and I think it's not belief, I think it's knowledge.
Right, okay.
To be absolutely blunt about it. You know, I've had to take on board all sorts of strange things like giants and UFOs in this topics which a few years ago would have sent me running for the hills. But one looks into this stuff and you have to get used to it. And this is just another. No, I think it's more than belief. I think there is. I mean, what was Admiral Byrd lying when he said he went there and met someone?
I have no idea. I mean, there are accusations of him being a Freemason and stuff. I don't know if that affects it.
A man can be a human being and a Freemason at the same time. I think it's only at the very top that Freemasonry is highly corrupted. Yes, one of my best friends. He is a very, very good friend of mine is a Freemason and an absolutely honourable and decent chap. So. I don't know what the truth about Freemasonry is. I would say, like every other institution, it's probably corrupted at a very high level, but not lower down.
Yeah, I wasn't meaning to cast aspersions on. I'm just trying to throw up some of the criticisms that I've heard people make of him and his evidence that there was some sort of motive or agenda.
Could we not? You know, I agree with you, and isn't it boring when people toss that sort of it's not even scholarly to say something like that.
You're right, it's shooting the messenger again.
A little bit, I think so. Let's talk. I mean, heavens above, I am not, like the Colbrin, I am not an expert on Agartha. I've just pulled some, to me, very interesting clues together.
Because this is in the Colbrin as well, is that what you're saying?
No, and I don't mean that, I just mean logically, like the Colbrin, I can't say why.
Oh, okay.
I'm not an expert in the Colbrin, and I can't say why it feels right. I'm sure plenty of people will think that's a horribly subjective way to deal with an important subject, but there's my hunch again, you know, from Enoch to Idris. I'm just trying to point a few ways out from the centre. Out to enlightenment. What a revolting thing to say.
Excellent.
But that really is from Enoch to Idris. In fact, what we're trying to do is a very good example of how from Enoch to Idris works, from hunch to out of the labyrinth, Idrisva, to enlightenment. Because all we can do is fall over this stuff until we find the way out. And we are so much in the foothills of all this, so much has been forgotten. Now, some of this stuff is thousands and thousands and thousands of years old.
Yes, and a lot of it's been hidden as well, which is rather sad.
Yeah.
Forgetting is one thing, deliberately hidden is much worse, I think.
Yes, and deliberately suppressing.
Yeah, you can understand things get forgotten, can't you? But
you can understand the forgetting, indeed you can. That's tragic enough, but deliberate suppression and destruction, that's not on.
Yeah, there's more and more of that happening all the time, unfortunately.
Yeah, so we've got to just redouble our efforts. But the Agorva, opening orifice or vent, well, blimey.
Oh my goodness. We can only talk about opening rabbit holes is a little bit larger than that.
It's a little bit, yes, that's a very good way of looking at it.
A 90-mile diameter rabbit hole.
But there, this help. Where's it gone? The other book.
Sorry, I was reading that one.
This one.
Go on.
This is a chap. No, he calls it the Lost World of Agati.
Yeah,
we've seen that one. He doesn't actually get right like you. He can't quite get to the actual centre of the earth, but he's found enough what he calls evidence and tunnels, and he's actually been down one of these tunnels and saw a green light in it. And no, it wasn't methane, and it wasn't a decomposing body or something. It was an actual ambient green light. I could not square it with my conscience to say that this man is lying or Admiral Richard Byrd is lying. Innocent until proven guilty. And with what we're trying to do with Britain's hidden history and everybody else out there, like John Chapel and the late Alan Hassel and all the rest of them who are trying to find out what really happened, let's look at what other people say have happened to them. And if they're wrong, but let's not go in with closed minds and say, oh, that's nonsense, before we've even begun to find out. It just needs a bit of a shift in... It doesn't mean that we have to open our minds to all sorts of idiocies. We can't possibly do that. That's as bad as having a closed mind. But I'm not going to say that these men don't know what they're talking about when they've argued their point cogently and soberly.
It's a bizarre thing to just suddenly make up, isn't it?
Yes,
based on something.
And it's to my mind, it's as ludicrous as saying, Sutton, who is Scandinavian, worse, all the Welsh records are forgeries. Well, why? Who would sit down and do that? Who, honestly, over hundreds of years, would sit down and do that? Oh, the Colbrins forged. How can you possibly say that? There's so much internal evidence. I mean, I've been using the Colbrin as a source for the Great Migrations, and I have found material in there which is, I'm going to say it, irrefutable.
Difficult to argue with, yeah.
Yeah. But there is another thing I'd like to say, and that is we are going to have to shift slightly, not the goalposts, but what we regard as proof. At this distance in time, we cannot possibly expect minute scientific details to be useful. It's like trying to measure a cubic inch of air with a paper and pencil. It's just not going to work. So we have to open our minds and look more and more at the likelihood of something. If the Colbrin says this happened and it fits in with something else I've been working on, no, that's not me twisting the evidence. It's, you've got to be jolly careful not to do that. Yes, but if you work from your head only, so here we are back with two brains again. If you work with your head only, then you are, like a lot of academics, in danger of twisting the evidence to suit your theory. If you work with the whole person, and I'm sorry if this sounds New Age-ish, I'm not really, I'm just trying to be a holistic sort of person and use all the talents that the good God gave me. You work with both brains, that feels right, then you bring this into play. Why is it right? How does it fit? And if the Colbrin has a basis of what I will call evidence for something, then I'm going to use it. Simple as that.
Yeah, I don't think it's any more out there than a lot of the sort of what you might call consensus or mainstream explanations of things. Some of them seem very tenuous, some of those
not only tenuous, positively dangerous, because they were all coming out of this arid mind. We are two, well, we had it the other evening, didn't we? But we're actually three peoples in one. We're rational and instinctive and spiritual, all in one body, and you've got to use all those three parts of you to come up with the right answer. It's not saying that the brain hasn't got its part to play, of course it has, but let's not go with what the brain thinks and then try and skew the theory to fit the evidence, because that really isn't the right way around.
Well, it's certainly true, as we're all aware, I think, of many parts of this. There's a sort of instinctive knowledge when something is wrong.
Oh, yes.
Or if you feel guilty about something,
yes,
or nervous.
Or you know not to do something.
Yes. It's not necessarily taught, all those things. A lot of things you just are
this
aware,
is the
aren't
inner
you?
wisdom, this is moon wisdom. That we talked about in a previous video.
Yeah, and if you look at cultures all over the world, there are certain constants which are just ingrained somehow, aren't they?
Yes. I think it's because we're seawater and the psychic medium is salt water. But then that's possibly getting a little too abstruse, but I'll try and confine myself.
Well, we haven't already, yeah.
Well, it's... one final thing I wanted to say was it's not just Earth that seems to be hollow. There's a chap who's done a YouTube video. I'll see if I can find the link for you.
Okay, yeah.
He has got pictures that show Saturn has what are called ice caps, but they're not ice caps because you can see the holes in them. Mars, is it Jupiter? Anyway, Earth is not the only hollow planet.
And there are a lot of theories about the moon being hollow, aren't there? Just to make it.
Yes.
The physics doesn't work with a solid moon.
I have to leave that side of it to you because I do not know anything about physics.
Oh, well,
except that when I drop something, it breaks.
Yeah, the moon shouldn't be able to do what it does, but that's... my goodness,
Oh,
we do
yes.
seem to drift into other
Well,
areas.
we do. Bell. An asteroid hit the moon not long ago. I'm sorry to interrupt this. I suddenly remembered this. An asteroid hit the moon not all that long ago, and the moon rang like a bell for 8 hours. I think it was 8 hours. Did you hear that?
I didn't hear the bell. But
Well, it wouldn't be doing that. You get a percussive effect. You might. Kirlian photography might be able to pick up a percussive effect from, like a bullet has a far greater exit hole than entry point. But no, the moon rang like a bell, and she wouldn't be doing that if she wasn't hollow.
No, absolutely. I mean, yes.
So
solid objects don't make good instruments. You need a void as a sound echoing chamber.
Yes.
Yes. Very good.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
I tell you what, if I say on YouTube videos, let's do this.
Let's do it. I think they say, "What's up, YouTube?" Or
do they?
Yeah. What's up, YouTubers?
No. No, I don't.
Drawing the line there, yes?
No, I do rather draw the line.
I think we should draw lines in many places.
Yeah,
I
agree. The thing about this particular topic, Agartha, is that it requires a bit of input from you, I'm afraid.
Oh my goodness, right.
So this is going to be more of a conversation because in order for what I want to say to make any sense, I really need you to explain about your your accretion theory and not the gyroscope, the centrifugal force.
Okay.
Because if that goes in first, then what I want to say will make more sense. But if we start with what I want to say, people are going to have us both clapped up. So I think...
I can cut in here and show me when I get back. So are we talking about the idea of the poles shifting and forcing people to migrate? Was that...
No, we're going far further back than that. And what I want to hear about is the formation with the crust and how that could have happened. The whole point of Agartha is that it's a hollow. It's hollow Earth, in fact. This is so much more mad, and as they say, out there than flat Earth. The flat earthers, sorry, your day is done. This is the new thing. But the thing is about, I can't do the maths for flat Earth. I did try, but it absolutely defeated me. However, the, again, evidence, one has to use these words because there isn't really anything else to say, but the evidence for Agartha is pretty convincing. But it would be splendid if you could explain how it's physically possible for Earth to have a crust and be hollow in the middle,
that goes back to
with water in the middle too.
Yes, that goes back to the interviews with Andrew Johnson. So I'll probably put that back in. But I mean, the whole point there is that you start off with a bubble or a liquid.
Yes. Where do you get the liquid from?
Well, this would be a massive block of ice or something floating around in space.
Like a comet? Could it come from a comet? I know water is in comets.
Yeah, I don't know. The problem is, if you look at comets as a source of water, there's not enough to fill all the oceans and the seas and everything. Nowhere near enough. You need thousands or millions of comets.
No, okay.
When it comes in, it would just be collecting liquid from space as it's wandering around in space. I mean, it would be like a massive lump of ice that would be melting to form a sort of bubble, is the idea. So the equivalent of gravitational pull would bring all the bits together.
Yes.
To form an ever-increasing lump. The key point is that as things, if you look at the NASA experiments and weightlessness experiments, or even on Earth, if you spin something, if you imagine you had a football or something with a stone inside it and you spun it, the stone would go to the edge of the ball, it would not stay in the centre. So this idea that we have that the Earth is solid with a very heavy solid iron core,
It's tosh.
Well, it doesn't
It's
seem
all
to
the
work.
wrong way
How
round,
would it work?
yes, I see.
How could it work? How could the iron be in the middle? It would move out to the edges.
Especially if it's molten.
Oh, if it's molten, you'd definitely float to the edges. How can you have something spinning and things stay in the middle?
Oh, even I understand that.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I'm
that's
no
the basic
physicist.
theory.
Right. So
It makes sense as well, because what would happen as it's going through space, attracting and collecting things, more things would sort of stick to it, if you like.
yes,
And gradually you'd fill the whole surface with solid bits.
especially I would say with fallen trees and accretion of autumns and
Or over time. that would
over
add to it,
time.
yes,
Right. So
yes.
it is physically possible, therefore, to have a living being, which a planet is. I mean, this. If you look at the spring happening every spring, there must be some
How life got there
some
is another question,
sentience
isn't
to
it?
this planet.
Well, I don't know
Or-
about that. I don't know.
Well, how else does spring happen every year? There must be some sort of force within the planet. Would you say?
I don't know how the light
Some-
comes in and everything.
No,
That's-
no, well,
that's-
okay.
that's-
Well,
that's-
we'll move swiftly on. As, neither
Well, we
of
know
us
it
is going
does.
to.
We know it does. We don't know how.
We don't know how. No, I'm not asking how. I don't think. I'm just saying that given that we have spring every year, we can postulate that there is some sort of sentience to Earth,
I don't know.
wherever it comes from. Some sort of mechanism
Well,
that
it's
is.
a pattern anyway,
Yeah,
yes.
pattern. That'll do.
Yes,
That'll do.
yes.
Right. Okay, that's perfect because.
The one word about the word sentient implies that there's some sort of inner brain in the earth.
Oh, but there is, like the gut.
Oh, okay,
I mean, in
all right.
fact, we have two brains. We have a brain up here and we have a brain in the gut. This
People
is
do
a
talk about
recognised
gut
medical
feel, don't they? Yes,
Absolutely.
yes.
And this is a recognised medical fact. In fact, it's-
Butterflies.
yes, and I
cherry
feel it
stars,
in my
all these
gut, a
things.
gut
Yes, yeah.
feeling,
Okay.
absolutely. Right. Okay, I hope there aren't any scientists watching this because there will be fainting. That makes it slightly easier to try and explain a bit what Agartha is. Hollow Earth is based on exactly what you've said, except we'll take it a step further. There is supposed to be a civilization in Earth, inside Earth, and there are openings top and bottom. Now, I have tried to Google South Pole and North Pole, but I think whether the Google Earth pictures have been nobbled or not, I don't know. In the when people were doing this some years ago, it was very obvious that the North Pole and the South Pole had both been, how should we say, photoshopped, smoothed over. And we know that there's no aeroplanes are allowed to fly over either North Pole or South Pole. Well,
That is all very strange, I agree.
well, it seems rather strange. Yes,
But what they claim to be the South Pole and voyages to the South Pole are actually incursions from the coastline. They don't. They haven't gone that far into Antarctica, if you like, to
What-
establish where the South Pole is. Well,
I
when
thought Amundsen had reached the South Pole.
yeah,
or
but if
is
you look
that
at where they
just-
actually went, it's just travelling in a couple hundred miles from the
Yes.
edge.
Oh, well.
No one seems to agree even where the South Pole is. That's the weird thing.
possibly because, well, I don't know.
Like Harry, or one of the royal princes, I think it was Harry, a couple of years ago, he did some charity thing to the South Pole.
He did, didn't he?
And all he
Yes.
did was check in about 150 miles to where they've agreed this is what we call the South Pole and come back again.
So you think Amundsen probably didn't actually
I
make
don't know,
it?
there's
no proof.
footage or proof I've ever seen of someone standing there with a compass in their hand going, look at my compass going crazy, because every direction's north.
Okay.
I don't think that's ever seen. So,
Right.
So
well,
as I say, it's a mystery. What
it is
what
a bit of a
beyond-
mystery. But
Yeah, yeah.
if yes, right, okay. So if you look at the early NASA pictures of Earth, and there are plenty of them to be found again in YouTube videos, which is where I do a lot of my, research. If it seems a sensible, sober, well thought out and researched video, why on earth not? Those NASA photographs of the North Pole have a definite entry with the water tipping over and presumably going in. Do you see
Okay.
what I mean? So you've
I
got
haven't seen those
you've got
before.
actually. Well, I'll see if I can find one,
Oh, yeah, we'll put
and,
them on
and
later,
we'll
don't
show
worry.
it up on
Just
the
keep
on the
going now,
thingy.
yes.
But so your water goes in and then it goes round again, and then it goes out at the bottom. only of course with Antarctica there's much more ice. I don't know why. Possibly because of the Earth's axis, but I am no physicist. That to me is enough evidence that there is something going on at the North Pole which we're not being told about, because if it's visible on the early NASA photographs, why isn't it now visible on Google Earth? What is being kept from us? What is being hidden? So it would seem to me from that alone that the hollow Earth theory has really quite a lot of mileage in it. Now, it suddenly came to me that the earlier representations of our our psyche, our being, are the Troitines, the mazes, and the concentric rings, like Atlantis, for example, which is supposed to be 7 rings, land and then water, and then land and water, and so on and so on. And we have these circles and indeed ovals all over, especially this country and everywhere else, for all we know, Lithuania, the Lebanon, these stone circles, and particularly our circles of banks and ditches, are everywhere in this country. Why is that so important if it's not, as I suddenly thought, a 2D representation of a 3D reality, in other words, inner Earth? Because if you're standing in inner Earth, what have you got? You've got a thing, a body all the way around you. So to be covered up in that sense, contained in that sense, would make perfect sense. And I'm not saying I know why these people came out from inner Earth, whether they came from the outer Earth and went in and then back out again, I have no idea. But it would seem to me that all these circles and not barrows, like Avebury, for example.
Yes, rings.
Yes, rings. There seems to me to be a 2-dimensional representation of what was once a 3-dimensional reality to whoever built them.
Wow. Okay.
I can take that a bit further, because in this country there's an awful lot of villages and particularly road names for some reason which would imply a track in antiquity. A lot of our roads are much, much more ancient than we give them credit for, and I'm not just talking about the 4 royal roads of Britain, but there's a lot of places in this country called paradise. And paradise is a very interesting word. Can you cut for a moment?